Hi, dear AstroLada family. So today I am going to talk to you about Chiron in the sign of Taurus. So that's going to be, I think, one of the major events of 2026, even though it's going to only last for about 3 months next year. Chiron will be entering the sign of Taurus on June 19. And it's going to leave the sign of Taurus on 17th of September 2026, as you can see it on the screen. And then the very final movement into the sign of Taurus is on April 14, 2027. So basically, we are pretty much looking at the next 7 years, what we might be expecting from a Chiron point of view. So I'm going to be putting the chart on for you so that you can follow what I'm describing to you. But if you would like to have a personal reading with me, feel free to contact me via astrolada.com. And also, I have put together a Chiron webinar bundle. It's going to be including five recordings. So altogether, it's almost about 10-hour long, all about Chiron. And what I'm discussing in those videos is the meaning of Chiron, Chiron in aspect to each house rulers. So what happens if Chiron is in aspect to your second house ruler, for example? Chiron also in your natal houses, as well as Chiron in aspects to traditional planets. So this is a rounded kind of like Chiron bundle in case you want to know a little bit more about it. It is available on a discounted price on astrolada.com, so you can go ahead and have a look if that's something you would like to learn a little bit more about. But let's explore Chiron transit in the sign of Taurus. We're going to do that globally as well as on a personal level. I think that's a very powerful and a very important transit to explore. Do not underestimate Chiron because I think it's actually a very important kind of like physical body of your chart. It's often called as the wounded healer. It pretty much shows in our chart our deepest, often chronic wounds. But also, this is a unique gift point in your chart as well. And if you develop it, you can work with it. So sometimes I tend to be looking at Chiron as one of the vocational asteroids in your chart. So, but let's exactly, moving into the sign of Taurus, what this Taurus represents. Taurus represents our values, self-worth, material security, the physical body, the earth, the nature. So I can imagine Chiron transit, by the way, is going to last for about 7, 8 years. Chiron's orbit is very irregular, so it spends the most amount of time in Pisces, Aries, and Taurus. The very most amount of time is actually in the sign of Aries, and the least amount of time it spends is in the sign of Libra. It's actually less than 2 years. So like I said, the last full ingress of Chiron into the sign of Taurus will be happening in April 2017. It's going to stay there until the mid 2033. So, of course, because on a collective level, Taurus represents finances and resources as well as security. I think the global wound can be around wealth distribution or the security of financial systems. I think this will come into kind of like a sharp focus. We might see crisis, for example, or necessary overhauls of banking and currencies and resource management as well. But of course, like I said, Chiron is an opportunity to heal something. So this is also about trying to develop sustainable, maybe community-based economies and redefining what true security means, beyond hoarding capitals. Now, of course, what you might want to be looking at is that Chiron is moving into the sign of Taurus, where Venus is in that particular chart. And we can see that Venus will be in the sign of Leo. So you try to think about, okay, finances, and then how does that connect to Leo? So obviously, Leo represents, for example, the rich, the glamour. So it's about the fairness and the unfairness of how much money, for example, certain celebrities have, and so on. But I also feel like that, the value of the earth, issues related to environmental damage, natural resources, the climate change, I think it's going to get more and more urgent, actually. Taurus rules the physical world, and therefore, the way we disrespecting our environment, undervaluing the nature, this might be shifting quite significantly. So I can imagine something to do with like recycling that becomes more of a topic, even more than right now, and so on, or trying to come up with some technological ways of obviously fixing up all the rubbish that we are creating. So this would be a collective push towards, protecting the earth, developing sustainable agriculture practices. But, Taurus is also your senses. So I can imagine that it's kind of like a re-examination of our relationship with the physical body, and the pleasure element as well. So I can imagine movements towards body positivity or natural healing of the body or prioritizing quality of life over material accumulation. And I think that's going to be one major topic, surely, because of Venus being in the sign of Leo. And remember, that's going to be kind of like being there for about the next ingression. But on a personal level, that Chiron is going to ask us to work on our insecurities and our self-worth. Often what happens with Chiron in Taurus is that we don't feel good enough. We don't feel attractive, successful. We don't feel worthy of abundance. And often, what we want, especially with Taurus, we want external validation, that someone is going to tell us that we are pretty, that you are capable. But Chiron is going to try to teach us that it's so important that we start loving ourselves the way we are. And we all have got the gifts, and we all have got the beauty and the talent to actually create financial abundance, for example. And, the other topic that might be coming up is the disconnection from the body. Like, I don't like my body. I'm struggling with issues around food, comfort. Unfortunately, this could indicate that, people with food addiction problems, as well as like food intolerances or, bulimia and all those type of stuff can increase quite significantly. So I think the healing journey with Chiron in the sign of Taurus is we're going to have to redefine our values. We're going to have to somehow disconnect from what other people think of us, and we're going to have to start valuing our net worth, our possessions. The healing is going to start when you recognize your worth is unconditional. This is also about having to create that inner security, pretty much. It's about learning to create that sense of stability, the groundedness that comes from truly within, rather than relying on external validations, external assets. This is also asking us to be self-reliant as well, and to kind of like explore our resourcefulness. It's also about embracing our body, healing our relationship with our physical form, such as sensuality, pleasure, practicality. And the gift is that once we are healed, then you become the wounded healer for others. And then you end up helping people recognize their own worth and talents and how to manage their finances responsibly, or all those type of topics. So that's the reason why, Chiron was wounded. He was poisoned and he was in an eternal pain, but he recognized that he would be able to help others as well. So, of course, you would need to be looking at what area of life Chiron is going to be triggering in your natal chart. That's going to be one of the houses that get activated for you. So, but I'm going to talk about that slightly bit. But Chiron, the sign position is going to talk to us about the type of pain that we've got, and the house position is going to talk to you about in what ways it manifests. So, the core keywords with Chiron is firstly the wound, pretty much the primal wound, the trauma, the greatest pain. Even rejection belongs to the umbrella of Chiron as well. Excuse me. Typically because he was rejected by his own parents and then he was raised by Apollo and Pallas Athene. Um, but also Chiron represents repeating self-defeating patterns. Freud called it as the repetition compulsion. So, for example, if my primal wound is connected to an alcohol addict father, then I might repeat that pattern and I'm going to be attracting someone who is addicted and so forth. And Chiron represents a lot of mother issues as well, early nurturing and abandonment, of course, because he got outcasted by his own parents because he was ugly. So he became kind of like the victim of that unlovable feeling. So now, if we want to be kind of like focusing on that, remember Chiron, the sign position is the specific wound, the recurring issues, themes and problems, of course. This tells you the nature of the wound. So Taurus is about value, worth, body, and money. And the house position is where the problem manifests and where the healing is expressed, basically. So, with Taurus, the recurring issues are connected to self-worth, the physical body, the relationship with ourselves and to nature as well, or our relationship to money. And where is it going to be manifesting? Globally, it's going to manifest in banking and economy, maybe resource depletion or body image issues. So it really feels like that, especially in a natal chart, if you had Chiron in the sign of Taurus, that would represent that your early experiences around stability and maybe material deprivation. The core wound is that I'm not worthy of comfort, pleasure, or abundance. And this eventually might manifest as food issues, body shame, uh, chronic financial fear, and so forth. From a suffering point of view, this is feeling victimized by the lack of resources, feeling stuck in a material circumstance, or being denied physical comfort or sensory pleasure because, maybe it's too expensive. Often Chiron in Taurus says something like, "Well, life is hard, and I will always struggle to have enough. I can barely cope." And also, maybe you have got a great idea, but you feel like that everyone is denying your worth. And then, therefore, it might lead to over attachment to money or possessions, because Chiron is kind of like a compensation point. So, but also Chiron is very holistic as well. So it's not about just the bank account, but also the security of the body, the food source, the home, the inner sense of groundness. Chiron represents herbology, for example, and interesting that it is moving into the sign of Taurus, which is one of the most natural signs of all. So it really feels like that the holistic, natural kind of like remedies are going to be emphasized in the next 7 to 10 years. Taurus represents earth, plants, natural resources. So we might start developing more kind of like special gifts for natural earth-based remedies, maybe healing through diet, gardening, or just being in nature, hugging a tree, and all those type of stuff. Chiron represents domestication of animals as well. And maybe this could indicate, while Chiron moves into the sign of Taurus, that we're going to have a lot more deep sensitivity to the suffering of animals. So maybe, that job might become quite not necessarily popular, but they might become quite busy, or animal rescue workers, or being advocate for ethical treatment of animals, and so forth. Chiron was also a mentor as well. It's kind of like a bridge between Saturn and Uranus. So Saturn is the past and Uranus is the future. So, and what does a mentor do? They are telling you pretty much which path you need to be on. So they teach you to to build true lasting self-worth as well as material stability. And it says we can get all rich, but not through get rich quick schemes, but through practical skills, financial literacy, or body-centered awareness, and so forth. So it really feels like that, Chiron in Taurus is very much about the unworthiness, the sustainability of our self-value, abundance, as well as basically getting in touch with ourselves, with our sensibility. In the meantime, of course, I managed to realize that I'm not sharing the screen, so sorry about that. So, what I was thinking is that there might be a global realization of, the traumatic impact of unsustainable, like, extractions, or maybe there could be a worldwide panic over fundamental resource issues as well, such as water, rare earth minerals, and so on. And the world cycle repeats self-defeating patterns. Could be, something to do with the, where wealth is consolidated at the top, but it doesn't get kind of like filtered down to the bottom. And there could be, unfortunately, it can be dividing people. Or I can imagine that maybe coastal nations or resource rich or economically poor regions, can suffer quite a lot of climate change, while maybe wealthy nations refuse, to change their like the way they consume things and so forth to make it better. Or I can imagine that somehow the industrial food production, for example, is going to go through a certain type of a transformation as well. Maybe ethical sourcing or certain type of agricultural reform that I can actually imagine. Or I can also imagine that there's going to be more awareness around holistic approach to medicina, or maybe more focus on decentralized local economies, regenerative agriculture, and so on. And I can even imagine that, like I said, pollution or resource like related practices, new sustainable regenerative earth practices that they are going to kind of like introduce. And to be honest, I'm very hopeful with Chiron moving into the sign of Taurus because I think while Chiron was in the sign of Aries, it did make a lot of people be aware that they want to be themselves. So I kind of love that. And but now we're gonna have to start focusing on healing our surroundings as well. And maybe the healing of that body that I have spoken about, maybe a lot of people are going to be, like I said, interested in those earth-based healing methods. So maybe we're going to see the rise of like dietary therapies, which would be great because statistically speaking, what, 40% of the population are overweight. So maybe, there is going to be a lot more talk about that as well. So these are some of the themes that I believe might be happening with Chiron. Now, I want to talk to you about what exactly we can actually see in the chart and forget about house positions. We are going to be focusing on the aspects that actually we see. So, firstly, you see that Venus is in the sign of Leo on 7 degree. And Venus is super important because that's the dispositor of Chiron. So imagine this Venus being in the sign of Leo for almost a year. It's not going to be there, but because this is the rebirth of Chiron, so we're going to use this chart for the entire period while Chiron is in the sign of Taurus. So, of course, Leo, the themes are identity, performance, dramatic expressions, ego, romance, creativity. Leo wants to be seen, wants to be admired. So, the Taurian wound of not feeling worthy is somehow handled through Leo's need for validation. So, therefore, it can indicate that we might end up trying to compensate for internal feelings of not being worthy by seeking external admiration or luxury or, validation through showy display. Leo loves to show off. The healing path there is that we're going to have to be able to shift that source of value. We don't need the external applause. We're going to have to have these self-generated creative confidence. Now we get a beautiful trine from Moon to Chiron as well. And I think moon is in the sign of Virgo, so that's a practical type of moon there. And of course, in the sign of Virgo, which represents healing as well. So imagine that the Taurian wound is about insecurity and body issues. So it's kind of like me turning to a practical service and analytical self-care, or it's the attention to detail when it comes to our body matters. So I think the fitness industry is going to be growing quite significantly in the next 7 years. But also it can indicate that instead of like spiraling into shame, you know, it is going to be more to do with how I can fix it, how I can organize my diet, how I can meticulously manage my money, or what type of useful service I can give to others to actually generate income. So somehow we've got the Virgo moon, which is quite detailed, trying to ground the Taurian energy there. What I find as a challenge, though, is that Venus is oh, sorry, it's not a challenge. All of a sudden, I was seeing a square there to Ceres, but actually, that's going to be a sextile as well. So, that's a very tight aspect, as you can see, is just 1 degree apart. So Ceres is interestingly enough is also about agriculture and self-care, and it kind of like repeating those uh, um, Taurian themes that I have spoken about. So I think this chart is kind of like telling us that people are going to take care of themselves more, like the hygiene element, or all those type of stuff that I have already mentioned before. So, with that Venus sextile series in Gemini is, the nurturing is going to be happening through communication and learning and teaching and mental stimulation. There's Uranus there as well, so it looks like that maybe I can imagine for people to be able to lose weight, there's going to be this technological stimulation of the brain somehow to kind of get the diet right. But most likely it's just about more talk, about the about, resources and all this type of stuff that we have spoken about. And it's kind of like trying to teach my child values rather than making them study all those unnecessary things at school. Okay, so Leo Gemini altogether is kind of like the spokesperson. So clearly it shows that someone is going to be talking about these type of things. Of course, there is a deep need here for care and security with series also. And I want to be kind of like I want to feel safe by the people that I'm surrounded by because Gemini represents our local community. Also, it represents our neighborhood countries as well. So imagine that there is this wound. For example, someone wants to steal my resources, and then the neighbor pretty much kind of like, saves me from it. So, it's with Ceres, Uranus in Gemini, it is all about learning new techniques, connecting with diverse people, gathering information about that self-worth and abundance and, environmental pollution and all those Taurian themes. So on a global level, it really feels like that there is going to be like a campaign, certain type of education initiatives or collaborations to pull the attention of people towards those Taurian themes that I have already mentioned. So, and the other big thing that I'm seeing is that Venus is actually in a beautiful trine to this Aries stellium. So we've got Neptune, Saturn, Vesta, and Pallas Athene there. So I kind of love that too. We've got that Aries, Saturn, Vesta, Pallas, especially because Venus is now separating from Neptune in that particular chart. But Aries is about sport, courage, independence, pioneering actions. So, there is this wounded search for value. And, I realize that I am the one who is going to be able to make it happen. It looks like that we are healing our self-worth issues by structuring our independence, dedicating ourselves strategically to self-initiated path. And we're going to stop waiting for others to validate us, but we're going to be building our own values. So Saturn is about crystallization, while Vesta is focus, and then Pallas Athene is strategy. So this is a very brief analysis, but one other thing that I wanted to actually mention here is, as you can see, Venus is super busy in this chart, but look at how Venus is opposing Pluto and Juno conjunction also. So that pretty much shows to me that this is going to be quite a clash over resources, let's say between nations. Pluto in Aquarius represents kind of like a compulsive drive to restructure power dynamics within social groups or technology. An opposition is kind of like a tug of war. So it's very much about the personal power versus the collective power. Venus in Leo wants to have the status really, but it gets challenged or threatened with a collective power. So it's kind of like imagine that we've got a nation who gets attacked, for example, by EU, the European Union. You know, let's say this country wants to do something and then EU doesn't agree with it, just as an example. Okay. But also, this could indicate obsession as well. So, a lot of obsession about physical body, money matters, and so forth. Pluto is the planet of power, control. As I want to control how much money I spend, I want to control, how I look like, and so forth. I want to control what type of connections I make. Um, I mean, Pluto in Aquarius needs to be the demonstration or the indication of democracy. While unfortunately, Leo is very dictatorial type of energy. So even this could be something around that. But the healing element is that sometimes we're gonna have to let go of our compulsive need for that status and validation. We're gonna have to put our ego aside. We're gonna have to transform our attachments, like how we relate to possessions and money and even toxic relationship dynamics as well with Pluto and Venus opposition. We're going to have to be able to let go of the toxic people, the negative people from our lives. So let me just kind of like summarize what happens here. So we've got Chiron in Taurus. It says, I'm not worthy. I don't have enough money. Venus in Leo reacts, oh, I must be admired. I have to prove that I'm worthy. And then Pluto in Aquarius says, oh, your need for attention, must be purged. It's better to focus on the collective. It's better to focus on the future. The moon in Virgo says that, it's a trine, so that's a way out. Let's just be humble. Let's find a practical way to fix it. Let's find practical ways of processing this intense emotional upheaval. And then all that Aries element there, which is saying, let's just initiate. Let's be on this disciplined path towards the change. Let's embrace who we are. So very briefly, that's how I see the Chiron ingression into the sign of Taurus. Do you let me know in the chat box below what you think Chiron will bring? Of course, Chiron, I think, um, often, unfortunately, it's a difficult energy to deal with. And to be frank, I think Chiron will show us potentially that there will be an economical bubble burst, which we are already on the way, to be frank. So Chiron might want us to learn how to save money, for example, and do I need these luxurious items, with the Pluto and Venus opposition, for example, just to maintain my status, or, I can kind of like give up on it in a way. So thank you for being here. I hope this video helps just to get a bit closer to Chiron in the sign of Taurus. Yes, Chiron will be super busy. As you will see, Jupiter is about to be squaring Chiron as well. So just a month later, and basically we're gonna have a T-square formation between Jupiter, Pluto, and Chiron. But I will be making a separate video about that for you. So stay tuned. I was Astro Victor, and thank you for being here. Take care. Bye-bye.